Oh, look at this. Such a wonderful gathering of smiling faces. It can only mean one thing.
Welcome to Theological Thursday. No, it's not Theological Thursday. It is Wednesday, which means we have a small group, New Zealand's biggest one. So feel free to join us, sit back, relax, grab your cup of tea as we welcome special guest Geoff Macpherson to the show. Sorry, Macpherson. Good morning, Geoff. How are you doing? Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year to you both. And look, I'm Macpherson, not worried. Just call me Geoff.
Just Geoff.
Well, one is you and one is a celebrity last name, so I guess it's a win-win, right?
Well, Geoff, it's our first chance to get together and, share a few thoughts and encourage one another too. The year is just underway, and yet I know for many, stresses start to pile up. So what's inspired your thought to share with us today for New Zealand's biggest small group?
Yeah, well, Jesus has this wonderful passage about bearing his yoke. And he says this thing, my yoke is easy. I've always, when I've been pastoring churches and taking funerals, this is a wonderful one at the end of a funeral to say to people,
really,
come to me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Come to Jesus for your burdens and find rest for your soul.
That is quite surprising that would be a popular one for you to use at the end, because for me it seems like one that you say to people when they're feeling really burnt out. Maybe how people are feeling, being thrust back into work and the pace is really picked up. Why is it your favourite one for funeral services?
I guess it's just, there's the finality of death and that people are going away with their grief and they're going to have to process that and deal with that and so much pain and questions. And, even as I'm speaking to you, I'm looking across the road, there's a tangi happening on in my neighborhood here. I can see all the cars out on the road. And so, yeah, this is Jesus, I think, speaking so directly to our hearts, saying, come to me. He's just said in verse in these verses around the statement, like, you can only come to the Father through me, and I and the Father are one, and no one can know the Father except the Son, and so on. And it sounds a bit exclusive, can sound a little bit like, I'm a bit excluded. But then Jesus turns around and says, no, you're all welcome. Come to me. Come and take up my yoke. And because my yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Well, there's a bit of kind of cultural revision we need to do on this one as well. Revision might be the wrong word, but like when we're talking about this idea of yokes and so on, eggs notwithstanding, what are we talking about here? And what do you think a yoke looks like in 2025 that people might be attached to other than Jesus?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so I guess we're not used to this idea of yoke. So this is an agricultural illustration. This is coming from the days where you'd yoke your oxen, your whatever beast of burden it was that would pull a plow or pull a cart. And so a yoke was usually a piece of wood that would go across the backs of the animals, across their shoulders. It made it comfortable for them, made it easier for them to carry something or pull something, but still it was a weight, and it signified maybe some work or some effort that has to go in. The really amazing thing is Jesus says, my yoke. This is quite interesting. So he's inviting us into a yoke relationship, to be yoked up with him, to be joined with him in going through life and following the path of discipleship.
So the idea is that whatever burdens we are carrying, he's actually under that burden as well. He is right next to us, hauling that load and taking the weight of it. I imagine what he's saying here is he's lifting all of it for us, isn't he?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that you're seeing that, and if context always helps us a lot, because when you carry on reading after what Jesus, when he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, he encounters the Pharisees who are castigating the disciples because the disciples go and pick grain on the Sabbath. And so, that's an example of where, a relationship with God is supposed to be something that's freeing. It's actually a burden. These people are burdened down with it. And Jesus is saying, no, I'm the Son of God. I am the Father of one. You can come to the Father through me, and the Father reveals himself through me. So come to me into this relationship with me, and it's not a burden. It's not painful. It's light. It's easy. And as you say, who you yoked up with? Well, you yoked up with Jesus. Who's going to be doing all the heavy lifting?
Yeah. Well, and we talked about too what this can look like for us in 2025
Yeah.
and maybe broader than a religious context too. Something that helped me gain appreciation for what Jesus is trying to say here is when I heard somebody also connect it to how, say, in the absence of Jesus, we can yoke ourselves to all sorts of stuff that can crush us. And that could be, say, like things that are inherently good, like, say, a career. Like, it's good to have a good job. But you can see what happens when suddenly that career is everything to somebody, how well they do, how poorly they do. And if things go badly at work, you can see the weariness of trying to drag this thing through life by themselves. So I think it's helpful to realize that a yoke is not just a religious metaphor. It can be kind of anything we've attached ourselves to.
Yeah, and actually you've reminded me of something when you talked about something that looks good. Even in a Christian context, perhaps you are taking on ministry responsibilities and you are so caught up in that service and making sure that you do a good job, you are actually not living in the freedom that God's given us. Because I think it's really important to know that we are accepted not because of what we've done, because God's already chosen to accept us.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't actually have to earn it or keep qualifying that. It's there and it's freely given.
Yeah, I think it's about, you're absolutely right, is where do we find our identity? And is our identity that we're in Christ Jesus, and then everything else flows out of that relationship that we have with him, that we are, the Apostle Paul uses this really weird language. He talks about being in Christ Jesus. And what he's trying to express is the nature of that relationship, which is so close that our identity now becomes like we're seen as Christ, and so to speak, that because we're in him, we died to ourselves, we live to Christ. And you're right that as we go through life, so often we get it wrong, don't we? We say, what does God want from me?
Yeah.
We don't say, what does God want for me? And in this passage, Jesus is saying, I want you to have an easy burden, an easy yoke, and a light burden. This is what I'm offering for you. I'm not asking you to come and give something to me.
That's amazing. And I think too, when we're looking at our own lives, it can be a nice little, litmus test maybe of when we've lost sight of what really matters. Because, he's saying, you'll know your yoke to me because it's light and it's easy. Like that's, because it's very easy to get lost in the fog sometimes, right? But if I know in my own life, when things are starting to get heavy and difficult, that can just be a sign that maybe I've yoked myself to something other than him. That's a symptom of it.
Yeah. And so and as you said, they can be good things quite often. The expectations around education and family and parenting and, and our work and all that sort of stuff. But it's where we're looking for, again, the word identity is where we see ourselves, how we see ourselves, or how we think God sees us, maybe is the way we should be thinking. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't need to carry all those things. I'm inviting you into a discipleship relationship with me. Yes, I'm going to change you. Yes, I'm going to challenge you. But it's one where I'm with you. I'm yoked up with you, and I'm bearing that load. And it's an easy one. It's a good one,
And it's freeing. And it's something that brings you joy and lifts your spirit and your heart, not something that weighs you down. Well, thank you so much for sharing some thoughts around this, Geoff Macpherson from Grace Theological College. And just quickly before we wrap up, I understand you guys are taking enrollments, so the best place to go is the website. Is that right?
Yeah, website www.gtc.ac.nz, and there's all the information is on there, plus the enrollment process as well. You can, as you know, you can do it all online these days, but don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions.
Geoff, if you could recommend one thing to study for this year, if it was you, if you were signing up, what would be the course, the topic that you would dive into?
I would do, and I can say this with a clear conscience because I don't even teach this class, is biblical theology, BT 605, biblical theology. That gives you the big picture of the Bible from woe to go, right from beginning to end. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Geoff, for joining us for the first small group of the year. And if you want to sign up for that paper, Biblical Theology, you can go to gtc.ac.nz.
Amazing. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss the next video.
We'll see you in the next one.